Just your name and your affiliation.
I'm Sister Jane Francis Bobina Mohlala from Talita Kum, an anti-human trafficking agent.
Thank you.
Diana Kanyere, anti-human trafficking, Talita Kum, Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Shimona. I'm from the Baha'i International Community Office in Addis Ababa, and we work closely on advancing areas related to social progress.
What's your name and affiliation?
Thank you very much. I'm Lingane Poswaya from the Baha'i Community of South Africa.
Andrea Kaufman, World Vision International.
Tim Stratford, I'm General Counsel of IF20.
Cara Santos Pianesi at the World Bank.
Noel Lance, I'm with BYU's International Center for Law and Religion Studies.
Ann Simmons-Benton, W20.
Hello, Melanie Barbato, Pacifica Communities University in Fiji.
Bonaventure Mashata, Southern Catholic Bishops Conference.
Hello, I'm Dimitra Misira. I'm representing the International Dialogue Center, KAICIID.
Hi, I'm Tracy Kedworth. I'm with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, here with the Church Newsroom team.
You are very welcome.
I'm Mara Hancock. I'm here with BYU's International Center for Law and Religion Studies.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to stand only because I've been sitting for such a long time. And in terms of the panelists, I'll ask them when they first take the mic, take the floor, to just say their name and their affiliation. No bios, please, so that we can use as much of the time as possible in conversations. We are talking about religious institutions and global agendas. And really, I think it's about everything that you can think of. It's about solidarity, it's about collaboration, it's about cooperation, and it's about speaking truth to power. It is really about how do we engage with those global agendas. And there's so many global agendas, especially now. Of course, for me, as somebody who works for the United Nations, the biggest global agenda that we have is achieving the Sustainable Development Agenda by 2030. But also, I know very much that working in Africa, there is no way that I can work here without knowing what the Africa agenda is. And Africa has its own agenda, which is Agenda 2063 by the AU. There are other agendas, like the food systems agenda. Recently, the global leaders were in Spain talking about financing for development. That is another global agenda. We have a global agenda on climate justice. That is another global agenda. The World Social Development Summit is coming up. It's a global agenda. This year, like I said earlier on, is 30 years since the Beijing World Conference in 1995. That is a massive global agenda. I could go on and list them. There are many of them that the multilateral bodies have come together and have agreed to put their resources, time, efforts, and skills and knowledge into trying to change the world. I think what sits at the heart of all this, when you look at the intersectionality of the global agendas, is human well-being, human dignity. It is about environmental sustainability, it's about climate action, and it's about peace, and it's about justice. If I wanted to sum up all the agendas, really, the best description that I can think of is the human rights framework. That at the heart of it, especially when you're talking about socio-economic and political rights and the right to development, is the ability of every human being to enjoy and exercise their rights and to benefit and partake in the development dividends equally and equitably. That would be my sort of my ideal secular framework. But if I was coming at it from a faith perspective, what I would be standing on is Micah 6, verse 8, that he has told us, or that God has told us what he would have us do and what is good. to love mercy, to walk justly, and to be humble. And in those 3 words, I believe that it encapsulates what we're trying to do in terms of the global agenda. That doesn't mean that we are blind to the systemic hardships, obstacles that exist and that keep women, children, people of color, and other vulnerable social groups and populations that sometimes, as people of faith, we don't want to acknowledge that they're there, but they are there. And just like you and like me, they were created in the image of God, and therefore deserve to be considered in this conversation when we are talking about global agendas. That is my introduction to this session. And in terms of the panelists, each one of you has got 5 minutes to start with, just to position yourself in terms of what are you bringing to this conversation in those agendas. What are some of the things that we want to discuss? We have one video which we're going to play at the end. I think it's really important. But in between, I would like also to just engage in the conversation with us. Please don't make me a liar, because I was a liar in the other one. I didn't give the audience enough time to actually engage. This time, please help me to redeem myself, okay, to be redeemed, so that people can engage in the conversation. I'll start with you, Maurice.
Okay, thanks,
okay.
Amanda.
Thank you.
And please, my apologies that I'm kind of going to read, because I know myself, if I start talking, then I will not make the 5 minutes. My name is Maurice Bloem. I'm the President and CEO of JLI, the Joint Learning Initiative on Faith in Local Communities. And I also, my apologies if you were in the other session, because you will hear some stuff that I said already. But JLI is really not an organization, according to me. It's really a community of practitioners, NGOs like World Vision, like Andrea, Church World Service, Islamic Relief, etc. And then we have academics from universities like Leeds, Georgetown, Seattle, Ateneo de Manila, etc. And you have people like me that are more like pre-academics. So we are an organization that, as I mentioned, is more like a community trying to work like an octopus. So each arm, our regional hubs, working groups and partnerships, they move independently in their own context. Yet they are all connected through a shared brain, an ethical compass and purpose. So we bring together faith and development actors to reimagine how sustainable development is done, not as a parallel system, but as one connected movement. So it's anchored in the 3 M's. That's not a brand, but the 3 M's stands for moment, moments, mastery, and movement. So moments are creating shared experiences where trust and relationships form, from working groups to community dialogues to global town halls. Mastery is the sharing and growing knowledge, skills, and lived experience. This is where our bridge builder and translator roles shine. Equipping development actors with religious literacy and faith actors with development literacy. Then the last M is movement, fueling sustainable long-term change through networks that keep growing and adapting. So this is not only about money. This is also really about movement, about justice. So there are then 3 strategies that try to drive the transformation that we would like to see, contributing to that sustainable, to those SDGs. The first strategy is religious and development literacy. So joint trainings and values-based translation tools, helping each side speak the other language. Second is locally led knowledge production, participatory research grants and mentoring, feeding into the state of the evidence navigator. We produced a state of the evidence report in 2021. What we're trying to do now is flipping the script so that the process of getting there is as important as ultimately the output. So we are working hard on basically when you go to our website, you could not only see documents, but you could also listen to songs or poems, etc. The third one is mutual learning ecosystem. So we have regional hubs in Latin America, East and Southern Africa, the Middle East and Southeast Asia, that shape their own agendas and inform global policy. Is that going always well? No, that's a work in progress. There is often still looking at the so-called center, what do we need to do? So that is a continuous process of mutual learning. So these strategies are underpinned by the inner development goals. Capacities like humility, empathy, and moral courage, aligning ancient spiritual wisdom with modern leadership. So I can tell you more about the inner development goals because we are working on that, trying to look at developing an inner development toolkit from a faith perspective. Again, JLI is trying to be the translator, that bridge builder. Okay, so another question that we come across is there's a lot of inequality still around. Why is that? Well, I think there are three things that we try to work on. One is the structural crisis, so climate disruption, conflict, polarization. Then there are institutional gaps, so local faith actors still often are treated as subcontractors, not as co-leaders. And then there is this double literacy gap. Again, without translation and bridging, development actors struggle to understand faith context, and faith actors lack the tools to influence formal systems. So what must change? Move away from one-way aid to multi-directional co-creation, faith and development actors learning with and from each other. Second is to shift from static outputs to adaptive relational processes, being agile and responsive, like the octopus model. And then the third is to apply the fair and equitable approach that you can find on our website as well, that we developed together with our community. So I talked in the other session about a willingness to put down the ducky. I can tell you more if you want. So lastly, stop, I have one sentence, and that's the call to action. So transformation is not a miracle moment. It is a disciplined, humble, and relational practice. So if we embrace the octopus model, we live the IDGs and act as bridge builders and translators, we can connect spiritual wisdom with empirical evidence to create a development system that is more inclusive, values-driven, and led by the communities themselves. This morning I had it done in 5 minutes. So, my apologies.
Thank you very much for that. I think it was, you tried brilliantly. Thank you. There are a number of things there that I think that you've placed on the platform, on this space in conversations, that hopefully we can pick up. In particular, the transformation is not just a single moment, but a discipline. I would like to explore that a little bit more. I remember that during the COVID period, I wrote something, Rudima, you remember I wrote a book, and one of the things that I was saying is that hope is not a feeling, it is a discipline that allows you to put one foot in front of the other and keep moving. It's a discipline that allows you to get out of your house even when you know that the community outside is racist against you and threatens you, but you have to keep moving. So it's really interesting. Maybe we can explore that a little bit more in terms of transformation. Maria, I think let me give the floor to you.
I do one quick comment though. You said, I did something, I wrote a book. So that's kind of
that's impressive.
Over to you.
Thank you so much. My name is Maria Lucia Uribe, and I'm the Executive Director of Arigato International, Geneva. And I think throughout this time together, I'm going to build on the experience of Arigato International, but I would also speak from the experience of PART, the International Partnership on Religion and Sustainable Development, that Arigato is part of. But I'm going to share in these 5 minutes about the work of Arigato trying to engage religious communities in global agendas. So Arigato, as the name shows, is a Japanese-based organization that means thank you, and it's thanking communities for allowing us to work for children. It's an organization that works for the rights and well-being of children through interfaith collaboration and action. And I think what is interesting about this organization and the model that we have is that when it comes to interreligious movements and so on, most of the time those movements come from the West. And this is a movement that was created by a Buddhist lay movement called Myochikai. And Myochikai, which is also very interesting, was created by a woman after the Second World War, and in a very patriarchal society as Japan, that created this lay movement called Myochikai to stand up also against the war, but through prayer and action. And in 1990, Arigato was created. And one special feature of this, which I think is critical when we look at religious movements and interfaith collaboration, is that Arigato was created with the belief that ordinary people can do extraordinary acts. And the belief that it is through collaborating and working together through these ordinary people that we can make a difference in the world. And that's how Arigato was created. And in the year 2000, we launched a global network, which is the Global Network of Religions for Children. And it's very interesting because when I looked and reflected on the model of Arigato, it's very much what today we talk about, localization. So our whole model is based on localization. So we work with this global network. We don't have offices in the field. We work with partners, grassroots organizations that often do not have funding, because they are very grassroots organizations. Sometimes they're isolated, but they are the first responders. They are there supporting children. They are the ones that can make a difference in their societies. And we work with programs. So our priorities in terms of thematic and global agenda is children. Children's issues, children's rights, and their well-being. So we work with the whole ecosystem of the child. So this network is the only global network around the world that is grassroots and that support children's rights and well-being. In the way we work with the different offices, we have thematics, we have ethics education for children, how children can learn to live together with people, different faiths, different cultures, ending child poverty, addressing the root causes that lead families to poverty and therefore children, and also ending violence against children. And we work with these three thematics in a very concrete way. We mobilize the communities, we support the communities with technical support, but very much with them. So it's power with them. But also we engage governments, we engage the UN, and we launch our initiatives in an interfaith way. We never go and develop a book and a training. It's all developed in an interfaith way, but also intersectorial. So we launch initiatives with the UN, we launch initiatives with governments, with other partners. And so I see my time might be already running, but one of the three aspects that I see are critical in our approach and related to what you're saying, Amanda, we have a framework that is based on children's rights. And this is very important because when we work with religious communities, very often violence against children is justified in the name of religion. But when you work on children's rights, you give a framework for collaborating. And so that's one. The second is ethics. And ethics is really an entry point to work with secular communities and with governments. And this has been a very good example for us on how easy it is for us to go with governments and work on education, ethics education. And that is a common point also with religious communities. That's the second one. And the third one is the spiritual aspect of our world. And the framework that we work is ethics, and we see ethics and spirituality as two sides of the same coin. But we don't leave behind the spiritual aspect of the engagement, and this is very critical. Child rights, spirituality, and ethics are part of this model. I'm going to leave it here, and I'm going to share some of the challenges that we have had when working with governments. It's not easy, and trying to engage the communities, but also some of the learnings we have got. So I'm going to leave it for the discussions, so I don't take more time.
Thank you very much, and thank you for leaving the other stuff for the discussion. As you wait, I would also like you to think about, you've talked about the challenges of working with government, perhaps other civil society and so on, but also it would be interesting, what about working with other faith and religious communities? How does that actually interplay? What is the interface? And I think it will be interesting for everybody else because especially on children's rights, there are many, many organizations and especially organizations of faith that work in that space. And I wonder whether if you work closer together, you would actually move much faster. Like the African saying goes, if you want to walk fast, you walk alone. But if you want to go far, then let's walk together. Rudimar, shall I come to you?
Yeah, that's
Thank
okay.
you so much.
Thank you very much. My name is Rudimar Bueno de Faria. I'm working with the ACT Alliance, Action by Churches Together. It's a global coalition of almost 160 members, churches and church-related organizations working humanitarian development and advocacy. And advocacy has been, since 2010, a very important strategy for us to engage in decision-making platforms, global, multilateral, and we have engaged in all of them that we recognize the opportunity for us to engage. We need to be very frank on that, starting with even the elaboration of the SDGs. I have been part of the even technical groups representing the alliance that were defining the indicators for some of the goals, especially the one on that was in the faith sector on gender equality, that brings elements of sexual reproductive health and rights and the sexual diversity that is very sensitive for many. So we have been involved in that. So I will mention later about the challenges engaged on that. But so as well as for the pact for the future, despite of the dimension of the erosion of the values that is affecting this process, and also what we see today in terms of aid cuts affecting multilateralism and also the impact on people. So basically, we engage in every opportunity that we have, but focus on bringing the people from the margins to these platforms. Not the people, not myself or our people in the Secretariat, but the people that is suffering the impact of everything related to climate change, related to gender injustices, related to peace and human security, and also migration and displacement. Our DNA is very much focused on humanitarian response, but very focused on the ethical dimension of it. And that is related to what we see today with the governments as well, reducing, cutting basically funding for humanitarian and development ODI. And basically we are dealing with this aspect. So our engagement goes to engagement with the World Economic Forum. We are representing, we are part of this global, global future councils. And there is one on faith and action. I'm representing ACT Alliance in this, where we are interacting with government, UN, and private sector, and also with academia. So that is a space that we need to bring our things, especially related to the moral dimension of the decisions. I'm a member of a subgroup in this that is about moral economy, but there is others about ethicals in artificial intelligence and so on. We are involved, I can list several elements that we are, but basically also in the private sector with the government, our engagement, because Amanda mentioned about that. ODI, that is a think tank in Europe, they have created a panel of 10 people. I was invited, the only faith-based organization on there, to discuss with the governments, all from Europe, including European Union, ECHO, and others, but also the North America, in terms of the future of humanitarian action. To think, and our focus, as we are very much involved in climate, gender, peace and human security, we have some cross-cutting issues that are important for us to do our work. One of them is about locally led and local leadership. We are supporting that very strongly, as Maria Lucia mentioned, but also we are involved bringing the elements of decolonization and decolonization of the aid system that we called ecosystem, that we need to change this way, as we are mentioning, because there are so many faith communities responding immediately, and they are part of the ecosystem. But that is not counted because of the legacy of colonization in the humanitarian sector. And also we are dealing with aspects of the confluence of fundamentalisms, not only the religious fundamentalism, but the confluence of the economic, political, and religious. So we have programs involved in that because that is fundamental, because most of the political polarization, the instrumentalization of religion, and religionization of politics are coming from this part. And we as faith actors, we need to stand up. We need to be actionable in terms of the actions that we will do, and to lose the fear of speaking out based on the values that we believe as faith-based organizations. So that is, I hope that I don't need to use my 5 minutes. So that's my introduction. Sorry for being so quick.
No, but everybody is okay. You're still following the conversation, right? Perfect. Just checking. Okay, Martin.
I'll start off with a joke just really quickly to wake everyone up. Does that sound okay? Okay, just to kind of add some giggles. What's a pirate's favorite letter? You think it'd be the R, but it'd be the C. There you go. I started off with just a joke, just because I thought, you know, it's been a long day. It's nice to have something to wake you up a little bit. I don't know if that woke you up, but my name is Martine Miller. I am the president of the International Center for Religion and Diplomacy. We essentially work at the intersections of the SDG 16, which is peace, justice, and stronger institutions, Women, Peace, and Security 1325 and the subsequent resolutions, and then the Youth, Peace, and Security Agenda of 2250, which we were a part of forming. And we also work a lot, I spoke to Marion about this earlier, on the environment and climate dynamics that are happening in the world. So our organization was founded about 30 years ago by a gentleman named Doug Johnston. He wrote a book at that time. He was actually a Navy, the youngest Navy not chaplain, but the chief on a ship. What is that called? Submarine captain in the United States. And after that experience, he recognized there was a missing piece of statecraft. Can you guess what that was? Anyone? Religion. And this was 30 years ago, when in a lot of the governance spaces, having a conversation around religion was a no-go at all. And so he wrote a book called Religion, the Missing Piece of Statecraft. And it's one of the foundational books of our work, where he really looks at what role does religion play in peacemaking. So our work is basically looking at and engaging with religious actors and supporting them in their peacemaking work within their communities, within their countries, within their regions. And now we're looking more at the geopolitical level. And I'll share a little bit about that when we get into some of the challenges. What we do is we really intersect with what the research says, and we collect a great deal of research on the conflict analysis and dynamics happening within different countries and different regions, and then we connect that research to direct practice. So we have diplomacy, our diplomacy space, where we work directly with individuals in key conflict zones. So we essentially jump into the middle of the fire. We don't tread around the edges, we go direct into the center. Some of those cases are Myanmar, Burma. We work a great deal on Sudan, and we had a colleague from Sudan in the room earlier. We work on Libya, we work on Syria, Yemen. Afghanistan is a key part of the work that we're doing, particularly around the dynamics that are happening with women in the Afghanistan space. We are now engaged in Kashmir, India, and Pakistan. So we predominantly work on conflict in these spaces. We're also more engaged in the US domestic space, because when we look at conflict and the dynamics happening within the conflict space, we look at it not bound by borders, because conflict isn't bound by borders. We have ripple implications, and it's always been that case, is as soon as you have a conflict in an epicenter of a conflict, it has broad ripple implications that impact regions, it impacts world. So if we look at the US context, for example, and let's just put that clearly on the table, there is a dynamic that's developing within the US space that has ripple implications on a global scale. And we're seeing that right now. And what does that mean to the work that we're doing and the peace that we're working for? So those are the elements that we work in. We research diplomacy, and then with our diplomacy work, we also connect it to really direct programming. So for instance, within the Myanmar space, when we're working in the Myanmar context, we work with different religious actors that are, I'm glad you said they're the front lines. They're the kind of the individuals that are directly on the front lines of all of these conflict dynamics. We work with them, and based on that diplomacy track work, two things we've done most recently, thank you, is we've worked with them on developing early warning and response mechanisms in preparation for the possibility of the outbreak of conflict and violence within their communities, which is quite frequent. So they come together and they form alliances across interfaith groups that then come together and they say, okay, this is a rumor we've heard, or this is what we know is going to happen. How do we make sure that our community is protected and doesn't devolve into violence amongst ourselves? That's one element. Now, another element, for just the example of Burma, is working with the key religious actors on humanitarian corridor negotiations. This will get into the challenges I'll talk about later. This was a UN collaboration with the junta, the military, where they were negotiating humanitarian corridors, but then the religious actors said, wait a second, those negotiations are actually getting supplies and health supplies, food, support into the military barracks that will attack the communities surrounding it rather than the communities themselves. And so we work in those spaces, particularly with elevating the voices of the religious actors, but also supporting them in the roles that they need to play within these spaces. So then I'll talk about challenges later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm looking at the time. We still have a video message from Ambassador Antonio Almeida Ribeiro. So we're going to come to that, not just now. For now, I want to sort of open up for a few questions so that we can engage. In terms of cutting through everything that has been said, so that we kind of focus some of our conversation. Before I come to you, can I just say that there are a number of things that have come through, and I'm trying to find the right words to ask this question. One of the challenges around progress in development and humanitarian is that even for us as the faith-based organizations, religious institutions, we have modeled our structures and our systems on systems of oppression. So even our approaches are very much modeled around that we come in, we teach, we identify who we're going to work with, and then we say, here's a model, and and it's not surprising that we haven't managed to stop the escalation of conflict, of poverty to some degree, that it has just evolved. And so I would really like us to, at least within these four walls, for us to be a little bit more real in getting to the acknowledgement that we have a world that is divided, and that division is manifested in the makeup of religion. And that until such a time that we accept that and decide to change it, we are part of the problem that perpetuates the papal bull that was written in the 1400s about the classification of human beings in terms of whose knowledge is accepted, is valued, whose identity is respected, and whose situation and whose humanity is important. Over to you.
Thank you. You talked about the importance of hope. And I think one of the challenges that we face when we're dealing with these issues is the world problems are so immense, and we can track a number of them and say, in some ways, we're getting worse. And if you just try to say, okay, what hope is there really? What can I do really? Then that's, I think, one of the biggest impediments to action. But could you think about, as you do the type of work that you're doing, and each one of you specialize in certain things, what are some intermediate steps that can be taken? The first step is not world peace. The first step is being able to do this or being able to do that. And if we break it into some milestones, then maybe the first milestone is something that realistically we might be able to hope for, and we can work toward that goal. And then what are some other milestones that might follow after that?
I will take a few questions. Yes, I'm coming. I will take a few questions and then we'll come back.
Yeah, I think my question is really connected, Amanda, to what you were saying. I think, and the power dynamics, right? So in a lot of ways, faith communities mirror the broader world in terms of the problems and systems of oppression. But also when we do see linking local religious communities to global agendas, the power sits in the global agenda. So the assumption is both that the local faith communities come with the language of the global agenda, with all the I's dotted and T's crossed to make sure they fully align with the global agenda. And so I guess my question is, where do we see like a third table being set? So not the faith leader table, not the global agenda table, but the new place where we're going to use plain language to talk about what we mean and meet each other and form the agendas together in a more dynamic way.
Actually, my comment is similar to the previous speaker. We're speaking about global agendas, but then also the realities of communities. So how is it that we create mechanisms and processes that strengthen the flow of information and knowledge and learning between what is happening at the grassroots and connect it to the regional or international level, but also help those at the grassroots become more aware that there are certain frameworks and policies that protect their rights and have ambitions to advance the development of their communities. Because I think what is being seen is there's not a flow of knowledge. And there's so much sometimes that are happening at the grassroots that maybe we're missing, but we're in spaces at the higher level that maybe we're asking the same questions, but maybe the answers are already there.
Thank you. I'm smiling because sometimes I wonder which bit is the higher level, which is quite interesting. You know, which bit is the higher level? And I know that from my own experience of being in Lesotho, I went there believing that I knew, and then I had to unlearn and relearn, and all of a sudden realize that I wasn't bringing concepts to the, so when we're talking about governance, I was trying to teach about governance, good governance, participation, and I stopped because I realized that in their history, Basotho have a fantastic concept and practice of pizzo gathering. They even have it in their villages where everybody, regardless of who you are, can stand up and speak and say, I don't like this. It's not just. And why don't we work with that?
Thank you, sister. My name is Nuruddin Sati. I am former ambassador of Sudan to the United States, to France, and to the Vatican. And it was during my time, 1993, that Pope John Paul VI visited Sudan at a very, very tough times, when the Islamists were governing Sudan. We arranged for the Pope to go to Sudan. Very briefly, I would like to build on what you said and what our brother, the gentleman, said. For me, it's no longer about linking religious communities and the global agendas. It's about how can religious communities influence the undergoing change. We are living in a changing world now, and we know exactly what's happening. So my question would be, how can religious communities positively influence the changes that are taking place? Now we are at a crossroads. So, and I think personally this should be one of the major outcomes of this forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I think that is one of the key things. And can I ask the panelists to just reflect on that as well? Especially, we're talking about local wherever you are. not necessarily if you're in Africa or in your, wherever you are, what can you do to influence, right? If you're in the United Kingdom, you can talk to your MPs. There are gatherings of faith-based institutions. If you're in Zambia, where I come from, there are gatherings of religious institutions. So how do we ensure that in your own language, in your own understanding, valuing and respecting that actually you have a relationship with the divine, how can you take that and influence different factors that actually have an impact on your life? How do you influence them? Because you know that they influence what happens to you. I'm going to give you 1 minute each, and then we're going to play the video. Who wants to go first? Rodma. Rodma says he wants to go first. Thank you.
Trying to connect with your question. It's okay. I think that's important for us to understand first that the decisions in these global platforms is not where the decision is made, basically. That's made in the capitals. And they are just cooked and organized and then formalized, I would say, in most of the cases, based on my experiences. And local and nationally, who is supporting the decision makers there? And in all the events, Interfaith, that I have attended, I always see the comments are that as interreligious work is monolithic. And for me, and that's associated to the first step, is to recognize that we first need to work within our own religions before going to influence others. Because the big division is within our religions. From experiences from Brazil to several parts, I have experiences that we are religious leaders, especially, not communities, are responsible for the bad wrongdoings, not sometimes, and the connection with the fundamentalism, with the economic and political powers.
I'm hoping that somebody is taking note. Oh, yeah. Yes? Fantastic, because I think there's some key messages here that we need to take to the bigger group and hopefully to form part of what comes out of this forum.
Maybe responding to the question of hope, what are these intermediary steps? And I think building on what Rudelmar was saying, I think we need to put into action this multi-track diplomacy. And what we do at this grassroots level is this, track 4 and track 3 diplomacy. Sometimes we focus, I think what you do is diplomacy track 2, and that's important, but how we work at different levels. And I think diplomacy track 4, which is the advocacy, as you are saying, is how you mobilize, how you bring the voices. I think that is critical. I think what is happening today in the world with gas
made those steps for themselves. And that's where we need to be thinking about how do we support civil society in making those steps for themselves rather than thinking government's the key.
Thank you very much. Maurice, I'll come back to you later if you want to speak, but can we just, can I just check that your questions have been answered? Not really? Okay. Not really. Okay. Has anybody, at least your questions, have they been attempted? No. No, okay, we'll come back to those. Let's just play the video if it's okay. I think part of your question, and sister, you wanted to come in, and I think the ambassador's point also needs to be addressed slightly more. Can we do the video? Can we put it on 1.5?
As a vital platform for dialogue, partnership, and collective action. Let me begin by warmly congratulating the organizers for convening such a timely and meaningful gathering on the theme Ubuntu in Action focus on vulnerable communities, and particularly our institutional long-standing friends, Professor Goldaram and Professor Catherine Marshall, initiators of this important platform. It is with sincere regret that due to unforeseen travel disruptions, I am unable to be with you in person. Nevertheless, I am pleased not only to share some of KAICIID's experience, but to reflect with you on how we can do more together to link religious engagement to the global development agenda in real and lasting ways. The diversity of actors in this panel should be a reminder that the complexity of the challenges we face today calls for joined up thinking, shared responsibility, and deeper trust across all sectors of society, including the religious and interreligious sectors. Actions to promote a culture of peace are being taken against a global backdrop of cultures living in closer proximity and conflict dynamics changing and becoming more complex. After more than a decade of KAICIID's work on the ground, one truth has become very clear, that faith actors need to be integral in development processes. They are often the first to respond, the ones who stay when others leave, and they are the ones who carry moral authority in their communities. Yet, their contributions remain under-recognized and under-resourced. I'd like to share two concrete stories from our experience on the ground that have shaped our thinking and strengthened our conviction that religious engagement needs to be anchored into policy. In August 2022, in the city of Obo in the Central African Republic, a violent confrontation took place between national forces, United Nations peacekeepers, and members of the local population. The situation quickly became tense and unstable. Soldiers were detained, protests flared. There was every reason to fear escalation. Mediation missions held by MINUSCA and the Ministry of National Reconciliation had failed. What happened next was deeply encouraging. A group of religious leaders, Muslim, Catholic and Protestant, members of the Plateforme des Confessions Religieuses de Centrafrique, supported by KAICIID, traveled more than 1,000 kilometers to mediate. They met with everyone: community leaders, armed forces, UN representatives. The outcome? The detained soldiers were released peacefully. Reparations were made to the affected families, and a local early warning dialogue committee was established. That intervention stopped violence before it started, and it did so not through force, but through trust built over years of community presence and interfaith cooperation. This work speaks directly to SDGs 16 on peace and strong institutions, SDG 17 on partnerships, and SDG 11 on resilient communities. In another case, a vital humanitarian corridor connecting Bangui to Cameroon was blocked by armed groups. Communities were cut off from basic goods, and the risk of a deeper humanitarian emergency loomed. It was again the members of an interfaith platform of Muslim and Christian leaders working side by side, supported by KAICIID, that intervened. They didn't come with weapons or official mandates. They came with something stronger, moral authority and deep-rooted trust across all sides. These leaders traveled directly to the conflict zone despite threats to their own safety. They met with rebels, they met with governmental forces, they visited displaced communities and listened to their pain. They appealed publicly and privately to open humanitarian corridors, and slowly their presence began to avert a crisis. Their action didn't just deliver supplies, it restored dialogue. It reestablished the principle that even in war there must be space for humanity. Their courage offered something rare in a context fractured by conflict: hope. This is what faith-based leadership can look like in fragile contexts. And this is the essence of our work at KAICIID. At KAICIID, we believe these aren't isolated successes. They are replicable, policy-relevant models for linking religious engagement to global frameworks like the SDGs and humanitarian coordination. I am privileged to share also a few concrete examples of core strategies followed in our work across our regional programs in Africa, Asia, Europe and Arab region, and capacity building initiatives. First, we helped embed religious actors in regional governance. Through our partnership with the African Union, we support the AU Interfaith Dialogue Forum for Peace, enabling faith communities to actively shape continental strategies, particularly around peace, social cohesion and development as outlined in the AU 2063 agenda. Second, we support religious platforms in fragile contexts. In places like Nigeria and Central African Republic, KAICIID supported bodies serve as conflict mediation and local early warning mechanisms. These are not symbolic gatherings, they are practical, trusted spaces for conflict prevention and response. Third, we invest in long-term infrastructure for dialogue. In Southeast Asia, our Dialogue Cities network connects local governments, civil society, and faith actors around shared urban challenges. In Europe, the Muslim Jewish Leadership Council and the Network for Dialogue help counter hate, promote refugee inclusion, and strengthen local policies. And fourth, we focus on the next generation. Through our Fellows program, our e-learning tools, and our work with schools and educators, we support young leaders, teachers, and grassroots actors to lead in their own contexts with confidence, ethics, and the tools of dialogue. So, what do these strategies mean for global agendas? They mean that development financing, humanitarian response, and peace building cannot afford to operate in silos, nor can they ignore the local legitimacy of faith-based actors. These actors are embedded in community.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry that I think there was about a minute or two remaining, but we've run out of time. I can see they've told me that we've run out of time. And sorry, sister, I won't be able to.
And I'm answered as well.
Okay, I'm so glad. Thank you so much for the video, and it would have been lovely if the ambassador was, if His Excellency was here, because it's a very powerful video and the examples that he's given us. I'm going to give each one of the speakers 1 minute for a final word. I will start here, and then we'll go around, if that's okay, and then I'll sum up and close.
I think one of the biggest things that we see, just as a final word, is working with religious actors in their communities. There's a lot of work happening, amazing work happening. It's not amplified in our media, as you said earlier. It's not recognized as much as it should be. One thing that we're recognizing is all of that work is being impacted by the geopolitical overlays that we're seeing today. And so how do we more effectively engage in that geopolitical space to be able to address that, basically pushing all of these amazing community on the ground efforts back by a decade? So I just want to mention that. How do we do that better?
Thank you. Maurice.
I don't need to speak, but okay. I am going to show my ducky again. So my apologies if you were already in the other session, because I quickly need to explain the ducky. This is about the scene in Sesame Street where, and my apologies, this is a Western example, but it works for me, you know, my children love Sesame Street. So Ernie wants to learn how to play the saxophone, and every time he plays the saxophone, you hear the squeaky sound. So his band gets annoyed with him and, you know, tells him at a certain moment, if you really want to learn how to play the saxophone, you need to put your ducky down. So it's something that I really, you know, try to do is, you know, what is my ducky? I actually have several duckies. I you know, collect duckies now. So, but if you are really in this type of work, we really need to start listening to each other and put the ducky down. Now, in the other session, my fellow panelists had a mnemonics, and I love mnemonics as well. So I also have one about the ducky, because this is really important. I will be in a minute, Amanda. The D is divine. When you have a discussion, very often we think we talk about the same things, but we are not. So you need to clarify about what do you mean and ask questions to each other. So that's really important. Then the U of urgency. Yes, a lot of things are urgent, but if you really think about it and you take your time, you don't have to panic. Being urgent doesn't mean, you know, panicky. No, think about it, take a step back. So that's the U of urgency. The C of connection, really crucial. Help each other. Helping each other is how we make meaning. Connection is not just about comfort, but it is how we grow. The K of knowledge. Knowledge gives us tools, evidence, wisdom, questions. The more we seek, the stronger we become. I, inner development. These guide us. You know, again, we are talking about system changes, but you cannot make those system changes without looking at the I and the we. At yourself, what are your, you know, dark sides? Very often, as faith communities, we only look at our own community, but also you need to do your hard work yourself. The last one is the E of empathy, which is also an inner development, but I lift that up because I think we could use a little bit more empathy in this world and really think that's crucial. So, yeah, put down your ducky.
Thank you. Well, I would like to close by saying, let's make the table bigger. I think we work together. We normally with the same suspects. We all know each other. The interfaith world is small. We know each other. And so we need that table bigger. We need to have others. We need to work across sectors. And we need to be part of the tables when decisions are made. And I take this example. We develop a multi-religious study on faith and children's rights with UNICEF and several other partners. And we develop an online course in Spanish at the moment, and we are working with the Inter-American Institute of Children's Rights, working with governments, and where they take this course on how to engage religious communities in their government policies around children's rights. And we were invited, we are in a collaboration now with the government of Mexico. We were invited to a meeting with the government about children's rights policies. No religious communities invited, arigato, but we said we have local religious communities, we wanted to be there. The nun from the Franciscan sisters that came, she said, I have been working on children's rights for 30 years plus. It's the first time I have been asked to come to a meeting with the government. And we need those spaces, we need to advocate for these spaces, and we need to do it quickly because the problems that we are facing today cannot be solved in the same way they are being solved today. We need the voices, the prophetic voices, as Catherine talked today, and we need to ensure that those voices are prophetic, because very often those religious leaders that sit on the tables are not saying the prophetic things that we need to hear.
Well, I would like just to make a call to all our institutions, organizations, and faiths to make a critical assessment of our engagement in terms of this supporting, what we are supporting actually, exclusion or inclusion, through our faith, our actions, and so on. That's very important because, as I mentioned before, faith is also responsible for the things that are not working, because we are not playing only for what we say in this public space. The practice is different, and we need to do something to see what we will be supporting. And the second part is we need also to stop attacking those that are prophetic and standing up, especially women's leaders, religious leaders, because I have been passed through our environment in the Christian side, when someone is speak out and stand up because we are promoting them, giving the space and asking them to take this role, no protection mechanism for these people. They are dismissed from the churches when they are not killed. So that is something that we need to do.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to the panelists for being such brilliant colleagues, and everybody else. And thank you for your questions, including the ones that we didn't go deep into. I want to end with something that you said. I work for the United Nations because fundamentally I believe in a multilateral system. I believe that it's only when we put our heads together that we can lift some of the injustices and inequalities in the world. And I'm saying some of because I doubt that we're going to eradicate them completely. But the aim is to ensure that where we see them, where we know them, that we do our very best to make sure that the situation is changed. For us as believers, I believe that it means a self-denial. And until we get to a place where we understand what that self-denial looks like, because the scramble for minerals, for example, in DRC, is there to come and feed our lifestyles. And until we understand that chain, and that we are part of that chain, right? Then we won't know where to break the cycle. So I think as believers, we need to try to understand the cycle of injustice and see what our role is, consciously or unconsciously. And then the last thing is really about hope. And this is why I want to end on that point of hope. That personally, I have beaten myself up for, why is that people of faith are so involved in some of these negative things? And I want to separate faith from organized religion. Because I think, honestly, as people of faith, I think we try very much to walk the straight and narrow path. And we try to do the best that we can based on our understanding. Like I said, the organizations of our religions have modeled themselves on the same political entities that keep people in situations of inequality, poverty, injustice. And this is the time for us and for our organizations to change structurally, internally. This is a classic remove the log from your eye before you try to remove the speck from somebody's eye. I think if we can do that, then we can lead the world by example, and hope will become every step that we take. And I really want to encourage all of us, let's not be discouraged. This is not the time to be discouraged. When we came together on the Jubilee Debt campaign, we were successful. And I could spend the next 2-3 hours giving you examples of achievement and success when interfaith we have come together. So let's remind ourselves of those, and then let's see what we need to do to change in order for this relationship between religious communities at all levels to engage with the manifestation of global agendas in all their different guises at different levels. I thank you, I pray for you, and I pray for myself. Thank you.
And I just want to make a comment on this panel, if you allow me.